For years, Victoria's Secret didn't just sell lingerie. It sold a fantasy of perfection. Bright lights, diamond-covered bras worth millions, giant angel wings stretching across the runway, supermodels walking with impossible confidence while the biggest stars in the world performed beside them. It wasn't just a fashion show, it was a global spectacle. The annual Victoria's Secret fashion show became one of the most watched events in the industry. Millions tuned in every year to watch women like Gisele Bündchen, Heidi Klum, Adriana Lima, and Miranda Kerr walk the runway like modern-day royalty. And if you made it there, you had made it everywhere. Becoming a Victoria's Secret angel wasn't just a modeling job. It meant you were chosen. You were desirable. You were the standard every other woman was expected to measure herself against. The brand carefully built this image for decades. It marketed confidence, empowerment, and beauty. It told women this was what sexy looked like. It told young girls this was success. It told the world these women were the definition of health, happiness, and perfection. Everyone wanted in. Models dreamed of hearing that phone call. Celebrities fought for front row seats. Musicians like Taylor Swift, Lady Gaga, and Kanye West performed on its stage because being part of the show meant being part of the cultural moment. It was called the Super Bowl of modeling. But behind the glitter, something far darker was happening. Because perfection has a price. And for many of the women inside that world, the cost was far greater than anyone watching from home could imagine. Behind the polished smiles were panic attacks. Behind the glowing skin were starvation diets. Behind the wings were women being told they were still not thin enough, still not beautiful enough, still not enough. Australian supermodel Bridget Malcolm was one of them. When she walked that famous runway, she looked like she had everything. Success, fame, validation, the dream. But years later, she would reveal a very different truth. She said that smile wasn't happiness, it was survival. "I'm smiling," she said, "but I know the way I look. The look in my eyes is dead. I was dead." That statement shattered the illusion. Because if someone standing at the very top of the fashion world felt broken inside, what did that say about the machine itself? For years, there had been whispers. Stories of extreme dieting, stories of drug use, stories of powerful men controlling young women's careers, stories of bullying, humiliation, and silence. But whispers rarely survive in an industry built on appearance, because the business of beauty is very good at hiding ugliness. Victoria's Secret wasn't just selling lingerie, it was selling an impossible standard, one that demanded women become smaller, quieter, and easier to control. And the closer you got to becoming an angel, the more you realized the wings were never meant to help you fly. They were there to keep you trapped. For Bridget Malcolm, the pressure to become perfect didn't begin on the Victoria's Secret runway. It started when she was just 15 years old. Still a teenager, still figuring out who she was, Bridget entered a modeling competition in Australia after being encouraged by an agent who spotted her on the streets of Perth. At the time, she described herself as awkward. Braces, a homemade red mullet, and the kind of insecurity most teenagers carry quietly. But the industry didn't see a teenager. It saw a body to be shaped. Very quickly, the message became clear. Lose weight. Not improve your walk. Not build confidence. Not learn the craft. Just get smaller. And so she did the only thing she thought would make her successful. She stopped eating. That decision would begin a decade-long battle with eating disorders that nearly destroyed her life. In fashion, thinness wasn't encouraged. It was worshipped. The thinner you were, the more jobs you booked. The more fragile you looked, the more valuable you became. Bridget says over the years, she was told things that sound almost impossible to believe.
She claims agents suggested cocaine as a way to lose weight faster. She says she was told, while still underage, to have more sex because it would help her stay thin. And as disturbing as that sounds, what worked most consistently was simpler: starvation. She remembers trying to survive on nothing but water for days. The longest she managed was 3 days without food. She wanted 5. Not because anyone physically forced her, but because the industry had convinced her that hunger meant discipline and pain meant progress. When she finally had to stop because she kept passing out, she wasn't relieved. She was angry. Angry at herself for failing. Imagine that. A young woman collapsing from starvation and feeling guilty for not starving harder. That is how powerful the machine was. It didn't need someone holding a weapon.
It trained you to do the damage to yourself. Over time, Bridget says, she became a shell of herself. Physically, mentally, emotionally, everything was fading. Her body was breaking down. Her hair started falling out. She stopped menstruating at just 25. She relied on anti-anxiety medication just to function. She was having constant panic attacks. Even climbing a single flight of stairs became exhausting. At one point, she said it took her 10 minutes just to reach the top. And standing there, breathless and hollow, she had a terrifying realization. This would be the rest of her life if she didn't escape. The cruelest part? As her health collapsed, her career was rising. She was booking bigger campaigns, walking bigger runways, getting closer to the one thing every model was taught to want most: Victoria's Secret. To the outside world, she looked like success. To herself, she felt like she was disappearing. Because the famous angel body the world admired wasn't built on confidence. It was built on fear. Fear of being replaced. Fear of being called too big. Fear of losing everything over half an inch on your hips. Bridget says nowhere was that pressure stronger than at Victoria's Secret. Even after everything, the starvation, the anxiety, and the obsession with shrinking herself still wasn't enough. She claims the company eventually told her she was too big. Half an inch on her hips had become a career-ending problem. Think about that. After years of punishing her body, sacrificing her health, and chasing their impossible standard, she was still told she didn't fit it. That was the moment the illusion began to crack. Because perfection was never the goal. Control was. If the body standards were brutal, what happened behind closed doors was even worse. Because at Victoria's Secret, beauty wasn't just controlled through measurements and diets. It was controlled through fear. Models and employees quickly learned that power belonged to a very small group of men. And one of the most powerful names among them was Ed Razek. For decades, Razek was one of the architects of the Victoria's Secret empire. He helped create the famous fashion show, built the image of the angels, and had enormous influence over who made it and who disappeared. In an industry where one decision could launch or destroy a career, men like him were untouchable. People smiled when they were uncomfortable. They laughed when they were insulted. They stayed silent because silence meant survival. Former employee Casey Crow Taylor says she saw that reality up close. She worked in public relations for Victoria's Secret and helped manage the glamorous image the world saw. The polished campaigns, the runway fantasy, the dream. From the outside, it looked like the perfect job. Inside, it felt very different. She recalls an incident during a shoot in 2015 that would stay with her forever. At lunch, she got up to refill her plate from the buffet. Before she could reach it, Ed Razek stepped in front of her. Then came the humiliation. "Do you really think you need more bread?" That was the first comment. Then it got worse. He allegedly kept going, asking how she could look at herself in the mirror and be okay with the way she looked. In that moment, it wasn't just about food. It was about power. A public reminder that even your body was open for inspection. Even your lunch could become a performance. Casey says she froze. Then she walked away, went to the bathroom, and cried. Not dramatic tears, shock tears. The kind that come when your brain is still trying to understand what just happened. What made it worse was how normal it felt. She says there was already a culture where these comments weren't surprising. They were expected. There were jokes about sexual harassment complaints. Not concern, jokes. At one point, she recalls an assistant casually saying that if she had $1 for every harassment complaint that crossed her desk, she'd be rich. And everyone laughed. That laughter said everything. It meant this wasn't an accident. It was a system. When Casey reported the incident to her boss, she says it was brushed off. No investigation, no accountability, just silence. And she later learned she wasn't alone. Other women had filed complaints too. Some, she says, were quietly offered money and non-disclosure agreements. ND, as designed not to fix the problem, but to bury it. The message was clear. Your experience matters less than the brand. Protect the image. Protect the executives. Protect the machine, not the women inside it. This is how abuse survives in glamorous places. Not always through dramatic scandals, but through normalization. Through repeated humiliation, through careers held hostage, through people learning that speaking up costs more than staying quiet. Bridget Malcolm would later describe it as a chain of abuse, something that started at the top and trickled downward. And that may be the darkest part of all. Because Victoria's Secret wasn't just selling fantasy to the public. It was protecting fear behind the curtain. And for years, almost no one dared to pull it open. But the cracks in the Victoria's Secret empire didn't stop at body shaming or toxic executives. There was something even darker lurking behind the brand's glittering image. A name that would eventually become impossible to ignore. Jeffrey Epstein. For years, Epstein moved through elite circles as a wealthy financier with powerful connections. But behind that carefully built image was a predator running one of the most disturbing abuse networks in modern history. And one of his closest high-profile connections was Les Wexner, the billionaire behind Victoria's Secret. Wexner wasn't just another business contact. Epstein had extraordinary access to his homes, his finances, even his inner circle. That connection gave Epstein something incredibly valuable: credibility. For young women trying to break into modeling, the promise of Victoria's Secret was magnetic. It represented fame, money, and the possibility of becoming one of the most recognizable faces in the world. Epstein understood that. Multiple reports revealed he used his relationship with Wexner and his association with Victoria's Secret to present himself as someone who could help launch modeling careers. He positioned himself as a gatekeeper, someone who could open doors. For vulnerable young women, especially aspiring models, that was powerful bait. And for many, it became the beginning of exploitation. The brand itself became stained by proximity. Even for women who never encountered Epstein directly, the idea that one of the world's most famous fashion empires had such close ties to him shattered public trust. It forced people to ask a larger question: how much of this system was built to protect powerful men? Because suddenly, the stories from models and employees no longer sounded like isolated incidents.
they looked like pieces of a much bigger pattern. A culture where powerful men were protected, where young women were expected to stay quiet, where appearance mattered more than accountability. And once that curtain was pulled back, the fall came fast. Public criticism intensified, sales dropped, stores began closing. The once iconic Victoria's Secret fashion show, the very symbol of the brand's dominance, was canceled. For years, it had been untouchable. Now, it looked outdated, exploitative, out of touch. The same show once marketed as glamorous and empowering was being called sexist, performative, and built for the male gaze. Lawsuits added more pressure. Former employees came forward with stories of bullying, misogyny, and harassment. Settlements reportedly reached into the tens of millions. Executives resigned. Among them was Ed Razek, one of the most powerful men in the company's history. The empire that once defined beauty was now being publicly associated with exploitation. And perhaps the most damaging part wasn't just what happened. It was how long it had been allowed to happen. For decades, the brand had sold confidence while privately feeding insecurity. It sold empowerment while protecting abuse. It sold women a dream while quietly breaking many of the women inside it. Victoria's Secret had built an empire on fantasy. But fantasy cannot survive truth forever. Eventually, the wings fall off. The spotlight fades. And when the music stops, all that remains is the question no rebrand can easily answer. Was this ever about beauty? Or was it always about power? When the backlash became impossible to ignore, Victoria's Secret did what many powerful brands do when exposed. It tried to reinvent itself. The company announced a dramatic rebrand. The famous angels, the very symbol of the brand for decades, were gone. In their place came the VS Collective, a new campaign built around athletes, activists, and women from different backgrounds. The message was clear. This was no longer about fantasy for men, but empowerment for women. On paper, it looked like progress. But for many former models, including Bridget Malcolm, it felt incomplete. Because changing the marketing isn't the same as changing the damage. She questioned how a company responsible for years of body shaming, exploitation, and silence could simply move forward without fully acknowledging what happened. Where was the apology? Where was the accountability? Where was the public recognition for the women whose health, careers, and lives were affected? Without that, she argued, the rebrand felt like performance, an attempt to save reputation, not repair harm. Today, Bridget speaks openly about surviving that world. After years of therapy, recovery, and rebuilding, she now uses her voice to challenge the industry that once tried to silence her.